Gardeners can be some of the most ardent problem solvers that I know. Whether it's marauding deer or bad drainage, a clever gardener can come up with an elegant solution to almost any situation. A good example of this is water conservation. It's a growing concern for all of us, whether we've got a garden or not. More and more communities are setting up water use restrictions. It leaves many of us wondering how these new guidelines will affect our garden spaces. Leave it to gardeners to come up with a wonderfully elegant solution. Xeroscaping. Xeroscaping means water conservation through creative landscaping. P.K. Kaladas with the Denver Botanic Gardens tells us more about xeroscaping.
The whole Xeroscape movement, the Water Smart movement, was really almost born in Denver back in 1977. We had a very severe 2-year drought. By the early 80s, the Botanic Gardens realized we had to address these issues, and several gardens were begun in the 80s. This actual garden only was constructed in the mid-90s, and it's become probably one of our most famous gardens. It used to be, I think, people always thought of gardening as just being a lot of color, and we have many gardens that have lots of annuals in them and lots of perennials that have lots of color, but the sad fact is that in our climate in Colorado, we can have frost in September and we can have frost in May. So there's really only 3 frost-free months. So if you're growing annuals, they don't perform like they do in some other parts of the country, but perennials have a much wider window. And especially a lot of our native plants here are much tougher, they bloom longer, earlier. And of course, the thing that really makes a difference is the fact that so many of these xeriscape perennials have what we call texture. And this garden, for example, at certain times of the year, in the spring and the summer, there's just unbelievable color. Even now, late in the summer, you can see there's lots of sunflowers, lots of bright spots of color here and there, but the textures of the leaves are so bold, and they're beautiful, not just in the fall, but in the winter. So the great thing about a lot of these native gardens is that they really pay rent, and they have a much longer a period of interest. What we find is each garden has a slightly different selection. A large percentage, probably half the plants in this garden, are natives to the southwest, the Intermountain region, and those are actually becoming more available. I always tell people that it's not necessarily something they have to do all at once. So I'd start with pieces. To pick that problem area in your garden that you're having trouble maintaining the way it is. If it may be a steep slope or it may be the south side of your house, start off with a small piece and build from there. And a lot of people want to just, especially when we have a drought period, a lot of people want to tear out all their lawns and everything else. I think it's important to have some bluegrass, and for kids especially. You don't try and do everything all at once, because then you'll just get frustrated and discouraged. The bottom line really is that we get droughts often enough that people really know that they have to grow these.